Are you sure you've found your soulmate? Or is it possible you're in a karmic relationship that's keeping you from finding true love? This video will unveil the subtle differences that can help you determine if your partner is your soulmate or simply a lesson in disguise. You meet someone and it feels like fate. The electricity, the longing, the intensity that pulls you into a story so powerful, it makes you believe this must be it. This must be them, your soulmate, the one your heart has been aching for. But not all connections that feel destined are meant to last. Some people don't enter your life to stay. They enter to stir, to awaken, to mirror every unhealed corner of your soul. Not because they are your forever, but because they are your catalyst. There's a love that comes to grow you and a love that comes to free you. And sometimes, what you call a soulmate is actually a karmic echo, a spiritual lesson dressed in romance, a magnetic bond built on old wounds, not sacred alignment. This isn't to scare you, it's to liberate you. Because when you can tell the difference, you stop confusing pain for purpose. You stop calling chaos chemistry, and you begin to walk, not toward the one who triggers your fears, but toward the one who honors your becoming. Let's begin sign 1. The relationship feels addictive, not peaceful asterisk at first. It feels like euphoria. Every touch, every glance, every message. It floods your system with longing, craving, intensity. But beneath that rush is something else. A quiet anxiety, a sense of waiting, a fear that if you don't keep giving, pleasing, holding on, you might lose them. This isn't peace, it's adrenaline, and your nervous system mistakes it for love because it mimics the emotional roller coasters you knew growing up. So you crave them, not because they're your soulmate, but because they feel familiar. The bond feels strong, but it's not rooted in calmness or truth. It's rooted in unpredictability, in hot and cold dynamics, in the idea that you have to work for love to be kept. And that's the trap. Because intensity without safety isn't a soulmate. It's a karmic loop. Asterisk. When your heart confuses obsession for devotion, the universe sends a mirror, not a match. Someone who activates your deepest longings, but also exposes your oldest wounds. And the reason it feels addictive is because it feeds your unfinished stories, your fear of abandonment, your hunger for validation, your desire to finally feel like you're enough. But a soulmate doesn't flood you with adrenaline. A soulmate anchors you. A soulmate doesn't make your nervous system panic. They calm it. They create a love that feels safe, not because it's boring, but because it doesn't require you to lose yourself to feel wanted. When a connection steals your peace and calls it passion, it's not your forever. It's your invitation to heal, to choose differently, to stop chasing sparks that burn and begin seeking a flame that sustains. This is how the soul begins to recognize the difference. Not in the rush, but in the rest. Sign 2. You're triggered. More than your seen asterisk, you enter the relationship hoping to be known, but instead you feel constantly activated. Small comments feel like daggers. Minor distance feels like rejection. Their moods become a storm you try to forecast. And no matter how much love you give, you never quite feel safe. This is not connection. This is repetition. The reactivation of emotional wounds that were never given a voice. The child inside you, still aching to be chosen, finally sees someone who resembles the pain she grew up with and calls it fate. You think this person is your soulmate because they expose all your shadows. But exposure without healing is not love, it's survival. It's your system bracing over and over while calling the pain growth. But real love doesn't trigger you into silence. It invites your truth. It doesn't punish your sensitivity. It holds it like something sacred. Asterisk, the person who constantly activates your pain is not your healer. They are the mirror, not the medicine. They reveal the wounds, but they're not meant to stay. Their role is to bring your subconscious to the surface, to force you to look at what you've buried, to reflect the places where love once meant abandonment, tension, or inconsistency. But a soulmate doesn't just expose your shadow, they tend to it. They meet your sensitivity with care, not confusion. They listen instead of defend. They don't make you work for clarity, they offer it. The difference is subtle, but life-altering. A karmic partner triggers you and disappears. A soulmate sees your pain and stays present. So when a relationship feels like a battlefield, when every week is a test, a tension, a spiral, that is not the universe giving you your person. That's the universe giving you a pattern so you can finally choose to end it. And that ending is the beginning of everything you were truly meant for. Sign 3. The relationship feels like a test, not a home. Asterisk. There are relationships that challenge you, and there are relationships that test you over and over until you start questioning your own worth. This kind doesn't make you feel held. It makes you feel like you're constantly auditioning. Like love is something you earn only after you prove your patience, your loyalty, your ability to endure. And it can feel like growth because you're stretching, you're learning, you're becoming more aware of your triggers, your childhood wounds, your fears. But awareness without safety is not love. It's trauma resurfacing, disguised as a spiritual assignment. You begin to believe this is what soul work looks like: constant tension, constant learning, constant sacrifice. But a soulmate doesn't exhaust you to make you wise. They expand you in ways that feel like home. Love is not supposed to be a never-ending test of your ability to withstand pain. Asterisk, Part 2. Soul growth doesn't require emotional survival. The universe doesn't send your soulmate to test your limits. It sends them to teach you what it feels like to rest, to be seen without explanation, to be loved without negotiation, to grow through grace instead of exhaustion. Karmic bonds often feel like trials. They make you earn your place. They mirror your pain back to you, not to punish you, but to show you what still needs to be healed. But a soulmate doesn't require your wounds to love you. They hold space for your process, yes, but they also offer stability. Their presence doesn't feel like a lesson. It feels like a landing. So, if you're in a relationship that constantly makes you feel like you're not enough, that pushes you to prove, to bend, to hustle for emotional crumbs, it's not alignment. It's a spiritual loop. And when you finally step away from the test, you create space for the truth, the kind of love that teaches you through tenderness, not through trauma. Sign 4. You're always the one doing the emotional work. Asterisk. You find yourself constantly holding space for their feelings, their fears, their healing. You're the one who brings up what's wrong, who softens, who initiates repair, who translates silences into meanings and moods into messages. At first, it feels like love, like empathy, like you're the stronger one, the grounded one, the one who gets it. But soon you realize this isn't balance. It's burnout, because your needs, they're minimized, your tears overlooked, your longing to be held in the same way you offer care. Unmet, you are the emotional container, the holder, the fixer, and somewhere in that cycle, you disappear. This isn't partnership, it's emotional parenting, and it keeps you locked in. A dynamic where love is given, but rarely returned. Asterisk, the soul knows when it's over-functioning. It feels it in the fatigue that lingers even after the apologies. It hears it in the silence after you've poured your heart out again, and nothing changes. And while your mind may say, "I just need to hold on a little longer," your spirit whispers, "This is not love, this is labor." Soulmates don't require you to carry both hearts. They meet you where you are. They take responsibility for their part in the dance. They don't hide behind the excuse of being bad at emotions. They learn. They lean in. So when you're the only one tending to the fire, when you're the only one doing the mending, the reaching, the repairing, it's not love. It's imbalance disguised as devotion. And the moment you realize your worth is not proven through overgiving, you begin to call in what truly aligns. Love that feels like mutuality, like reciprocity, like two people walking, not one person dragging sign 5. You're more afraid of losing them than losing yourself. Asterisk, there's a kind of love that doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing. Fear of setting a boundary. Fear of asking for too much, needing too much, being too much. And so you shrink. You silence your needs. You mold yourself into someone smaller, more palatable, just to keep them close. But that's not connection. That's captivity. You stay, not because it feels right, but because the thought of being alone terrifies you more than the pain of being unseen. You rationalize. You explain away the tension, the neglect, the emotional gaps, because the idea of losing them feels like losing your sense of worth. And that is the lie karmic bonds often sell, that love should hurt, that proximity is proof of value, that attachment is intimacy. But real love doesn't cost yourself, it reflects it, it cherishes it. It never asks you to disappear in order to remain. Asterisk, there comes a moment when your soul refuses to play along, when your body tightens every time you abandon yourself just to feel close, when your intuition begins to scream louder than your fear of loss. And in that moment, you begin to see clearly, this isn't love, it's survival. You realize you've been choosing someone who makes you feel afraid to be yourself, who makes your needs feel like burdens, your honesty feel like danger. But you weren't born to negotiate for scraps. You weren't created to twist into silence just to be touched. You are here to expand, not contract. And when you finally choose yourself, when you risk the grief of letting go over the slow death of self-abandonment, the universe meets you there, because your soulmate won't ask you to choose between love and freedom. There'll be the space where the two finally become the same sign. 6. You're evolving, but they're standing still. Sign 6. You're evolving, but they're standing still. Asterisk, you're healing. You're reading, reflecting, facing your patterns. You're learning how to communicate, how to hold space, how to break old cycles. You're shedding your past, but they stay the same. They resist change, dismiss introspection, deflect responsibility, and in subtle ways, they make your growth feel inconvenient. You begin to hide your awakening just to keep the peace. You water down your light so they don't feel threatened by it. You stop bringing up what you're learning because it only creates distance, or worse, ridicule. But love isn't threatened by evolution, it celebrates it. When you're growing and they're not even willing to try, you're no longer in a partnership. You're dragging the weight of someone who's not ready to meet you in the becoming. And soon, your expansion starts to feel like betrayal. Not because it is, but because their comfort depends on your stagnation. Asterisk, the universe has no interest in keeping you bound to someone who cannot walk beside your transformation. It listens when you begin to outgrow the dynamics that once felt like home. It sees the friction not as failure, but as evidence. Evidence that your soul is moving, stretching, rising. And when your path becomes too expansive for the container you're in, the container begins to crack. Not because you're breaking it, but because it was never built to hold your wholeness. A soulmate evolves with you. They don't have to grow at your pace, but they move, they reflect, they listen. They're willing to meet you in the discomfort of becoming. A karmic bond resists that. It clings to the past. It stays fixed while you transform, then shames your transformation for creating distance. So if the relationship begins to feel too small for your healing, that is not a reason to shrink. That is a sign you're being freed. Sign 7. Deep down, you know this isn't the love you prayed for. Asterisk. There's a moment in every relationship where the soul speaks, not through logic, not through loud alarms, but through a subtle ache, a quiet knowing, a whisper that says, "This isn't it." And you try to silence it. You list the good moments. You focus on their potential. You remind yourself of how much time you've invested, how many memories you've created, how you've already chosen them, but still the voice remains. Not to shame you, not to push you, but to call you back to yourself. Because somewhere beneath the routine, beneath the dreams you've built on hope and habit, you know, this love feels heavy. It feels uneven. It feels like longing dressed as loyalty. And no matter how much you try to convince your heart to settle, it refuses, not because it's broken, but because it remembers what alignment feels like. Asterisk. The soul doesn't scream, it waits. It waits for you to get quiet enough to hear what's always been true. That the love you've accepted is not the love you envisioned. That the version of yourself you've become in this relationship is not the woman you're here to be. And once you hear that voice, really hear it, there's no unhearing it. Because the moment you admit this isn't what you prayed for, what you longed for, what your heart whispered to the stars at night, you open a portal, not just out of a relationship, but into yourself. You stop asking, is this love enough? And you start asking, am I enough to choose more? The truth is, some endings are not collapses, they are corrections. Back toward wholeness, back toward a love that doesn't just feel familiar, but finally feels like home. And that is the true role of a soulmate, not just to stay, but to awaken the deepest truth inside you, away from them. Asterisk, you didn't fail because it ended. You awakened. You stopped calling intensity love. You stopped naming emotional labor as loyalty. You stopped confusing your deepest triggers for your deepest truth. And in the quiet aftermath, you found something far more sacred than a perfect relationship. You found clarity. Clarity that real love doesn't demand your silence. It doesn't punish your growth. It doesn't make you feel like you're too much just for being real. You learned that soulmates aren't always the ones who stay. Sometimes they're the ones who reveal, who enter to unearth what you still haven't healed, who shake you loose from the illusions you clung to out of fear. And when they leave, you grieve, not just the person, but the version of you who believed love had to be painful to be powerful. But now you rise, not harder, not colder, but softer, wiser, clearer. You know now that true love doesn't test your worth, it reflects it. So when it comes again, and it will, you won't chase, you'll recognize, because this time you're not looking for your missing piece, you're standing whole. And that is where real love begins. Asterisk, if you're still here, it means something inside you is ready to release the illusion, ready to let go of love that demands your disappearance, ready to return, not to someone else, but to you. You didn't come here to repeat the pain, you came here to heal it, to rewrite the story, to remember that your heart was never meant to beg for belonging. So I want to hear your voice. Resonated. What truth have you been holding in silence? What did this awaken inside you? Share it in the comments, because your story could be the mirror someone else needs to finally choose themselves too. And if this space felt like breath, like truth, like coming home, subscribe, not for more content, but for sacred company. Sensitivity is not weakness, that your longing is not foolish, that your becoming is holy. Here we rise differently, not through perfection, but through presence. And this space, it was created for women like you.